Prep. I'm Michael New, your host. Welcome to Thailand Today. Thailand's traffic is a notorious problem. With that comes increased fuel consumption. However, technology has been able to provide tools to help ease some of these issues, including a mobile application called Moverity, which helps track fuel consumption. To find out more on this, today we speak to Caroline Capone, Director of Moverity, Project GIZ, on this wonderful innovation. Sawadee krap.
Sawadee krap.
Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
First off, what does GIZ stand for?
GIZ, yes, we have quite a complicated name. Maybe just to explain it first, we are the German Agency for International Cooperation. Mm-hmm. The German term then would be Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, and that is where the GIZ comes from.
From the Deutsch part?
From the German part of the explanation.
Okay.
But in base, if you can just remember, we are the German Agency for International Cooperation. So
okay, well, I'm glad they didn't write that one down for me. I might have had trouble.
Yes.
What is Moverity exactly, and how did this application come about?
Well, Moverity is a digital tool that crowdsources real-world fuel economy data. So what we want to achieve with Moverity overall, the overall objective of Moverity is to decrease fuel consumption from driving cars, and with that also to reduce emissions, air pollutions as well as CO2 emissions that lead to climate change. And Moverity contributes to that goal in two ways. First, it helps drivers to reduce their fuel consumption when driving or also when selecting a car. And on the other hand, it also supports policymakers. So policymakers can, based on consistent data and based on transparent data, they can enact and design more effective policies in order to tackle the fuel efficiency problem in Thailand.
Okay, that sounds like fantastic work. Who are the people behind this project?
The people behind Moverity are first of all GIZ, so the German Agency for International Cooperation. And GIZ, maybe to explain you a little bit about GIZ, I don't know, I guess the viewers are not very much familiar with what we do. So I will just give you a little bit of a background on us maybe. So we are a 100% German government-owned company. We work non-profit though, and our mission and our objective is to support our partner countries in currently roughly 120 countries in the world in their efforts to improve sustainability and development. And that can take various forms. So we work in many different sectors: agriculture, energy, waste, and for me, it's transport. So I work on transport and trying to make it more sustainable.
So this is one part of a much larger project?
This is one small project of many projects that we have around the world and of 3 bigger projects that we have in Thailand currently.
Yeah, but of course, fuel burning accounts for a good deal of greenhouse gases, is that right?
That is very much right, and especially in the ASEAN region, it's quite interesting because the new cars that are released on the market every year have quite a high fuel consumption compared to the rest of the world. So for example, if you take the average of all the cars that are registered in 1 year in Thailand and in ASEAN, actually in the whole region, they consume on average 7.2 liters per 100 kilometers. While in Japan, for example, or also in Europe, it's just 5.2.
Is that possibly to do with how many traffic jams we have in Bangkok?
I mean, actually no, or maybe yes, a little bit. But the data where these numbers come from is laboratory testing.
So it's all under standardized conditions.
Yes, however, every country has a little bit of a different, what you call driving cycles, so they try to reflect the real world situations, and with that also congestion, city drive cycles versus highway drive cycles and so on. But of course in a laboratory setting this is very difficult. So you just get these figures that are the only figures that are around, and sometimes researchers have found these are 50% different from the real world data. So that is also one of the reasons why we do this. But coming back to your question, is fuel consumption a big problem for greenhouse gases and for climate change, and also for air pollution. 50% of the PM 2.5 pollution that we see in Bangkok, we all suffer from it.
Right.
That comes from transport. It's even more than 50% maybe. And that has to do with fuel consumption as well. So the government, not only in Thailand, but actually everywhere in the world, tries to reduce fuel consumption. Because with decreased fuel consumption comes decreased emissions. And also, of course, there are other benefits for the countries. Nobody wants to be dependent on a lot of energy imports, for example. It's also a cost factor for the drivers, right?
So that would be one of the main advantages to the drivers who use the Moverity app, right? Is just they're saving money by using less fuel.
Exactly. That is the big benefit for the drivers. So actually there are two benefits for drivers leading up to saving fuel, and with saving fuel, saving money from your wallet. So if you imagine, I just told you it's 2 liters more than it needed to be, right? For every 100 kilometers. Just imagine you drive 50 kilometers a day, which I think is not too far from the future, from the reality in Bangkok, for example. That is, with the current fuel price, 35 baht, I think, roundabout there.
Yeah.
That would be 1 day, 35 baht. That would be 1 month, 1,000 baht, more or less. 1 year, 12,000. So this is quite some money that can be saved. And the app helps you with that by comparing different car models. So you get, when you enter our platform, you get real-world fuel consumption data on all car models that are currently sold in the ASEAN market. And you can directly compare. Let's say I want to go buy me a new car. Well, then in that case, the platform gives me the data that I need to assess which one is the more efficient model.
Yeah.
And also what is very nice about the platform, I think, is that it does not only give you this number that is very hard to grasp for many people, 7.2 liters per 100 kilometer, what does that even mean? I don't feel it in my pocket if I hear that. But it gives you also a prediction on what that means over a year or over a lifetime of the vehicle. And it translates also the fuel consumption into money.
Yeah, 12,000 is significant.
Yeah, and that is a unit I think that both you and me and everybody on the street can relate more to, because we use money every day.
I have another question for you. In terms of fuel, is there a specific type of fuel that performs better than the others? Let's say comparing natural gas to diesel.
Performs in what sense? Environmental?
So it's kind of a tough one. I'd say, how does it perform both environmentally and in terms of monetary consumption?
Well, that is very hard to answer, because of course it depends on a lot of factors. Normally you use, for example, diesel fuel in bigger cars, in buses, in Thailand, in pickup trucks, for example. And it is said, and you can maybe experience, that fuel cost is lower in the operational sense, but then again you have bigger vehicles and then you consume more. So it's it's not easy to make a general statement on this.
So typically they don't use diesel in smaller vehicles?
Yes, typically that would be.
I'm not a car guy, so I genuinely don't know.
Yeah. In environmental terms, the big problem with diesel fuel is that it emits PM 2.5.
Okay.
So that is mainly where it comes from. Not only from diesel fuel, also other fuels have emissions, but diesel is known for having a high amount of PM 2.5 emissions.
But of course, this app will let you reduce that too.
Yes. Of course, Moverity is just one of many potential applications or many policies that should be taken in order to make transport overall more efficient. What we are dealing with here is just the tailpipe emissions, right? So we are focusing on improving technology of the vehicles. But actually what should be done first in order to increase the overall system, improve the efficiency of the overall system, is to try to avoid traffic. That would be the first thing, avoid traffic. You can do that easily by integrating planning, land use planning, urban planning, and mobility planning. So the urban functions are maybe closer to where you sleep, and not you have your little satellite sleeping towns at one end of the city and then the urban function at the others, and you create a lot of trips.
So it starts with city design. Hold that thought for a second. We're just going to take a quick break. We'll continue the discussion right after these messages. Don't go away.
Do you know where I am right now? This is the doorway to ASEAN. Cha Cheong Sao, Chonburi, and Rayong provinces have been designated for the development of the Eastern Economic Corridor. That's why it's not difficult to be the center of communications and logistics in the region by land, air, and sea. We're upgrading our industrial sector into a world-class economic zone for investors from around the world. In addition, there are plenty of other benefits, such as various forms of support, visa work permits, and tax exemptions. We're ready to raise the bar on our economy. Are you ready to open the door to ASEAN? EEC, Eastern Economic Corridor.
Welcome back. You're watching Thailand Today. We continue our discussion with Caroline Capone on how the app is able to assist drivers. What are some fuel-saving tips that you can get from this app?
Yes, I actually have not talked about that yet. So the second way, we talked about when you want to go buy a new car, how the app can help you, right? But actually there's a second way. If you already own a car, you can get eco-driving tips from Moverity. Eco-driving, actually, you would maybe think, well, my drive style is not so important for fuel consumption, but actually it can lead up to 20% of decrease of your fuel consumption. And that is also significant already. And the app provides you these tips via push notifications. For example, when you're driving the car and you have your Google Maps on your windshield or on your dashboard. And a tip, there are many tips, many different tips, of course, but one tip that Moverity could give you, for example, is that you should try to not excessively brake with your motor brake. Instead of doing that, because when you do that, you use your motor and you consume fuel.
Right, you're converting your kinetic energy into heat.
Yes. While you could also maybe look a little bit ahead and you know, okay, there's a red light coming up and I already changed gears and I just let the road friction and the air friction do the work. That is also a possibility, and by that you can already save a lot of fuel. Another tip that you could get is that you should check regularly on your tire pressure. That can also, if you have your tire pressure too low or too high, then that can lead to an increased fuel consumption up to 11%, for example.
So a slightly deflated tire will use a lot more energy in pushing the car forward?
Because friction is higher on the road
right, because
surface.
it's touching with more than...
Exactly.
Okay.
That would be a second one. I can go on forever. Maybe I give
please
you
do. I mean, I'm genuinely interested, and hopefully people at home will be able to save some money just by listening to you and hopefully getting the app.
Yes, I would certainly advise everybody to download our app, or maybe even we have to make it very easy for the consumer. We have these little doors, for example, which I just show to the camera right now. You can hang them on your rear window, your mirror, and well, the way it works to use the app, right? You have every time that you are at a gas station, you have to input data.
Okay.
And then you just can scan this QR code with your mobile phone, and it leads you directly to the platform, and you just have to ingress the numbers. Or you can also talk to this little character via a chatbot, a Facebook chatbot. So if you prefer that to put
And where would you get one of these?
We have just a couple of weeks ago actually transferred Moverity to the Ministry of Energy and there to the Department of Alternative Energy Development, DEDE. So they are now the owners of this platform. They plan to use it within their big data approach, and they also have plans to improve it further, improve usability further. but they would be the ones now responsible for everything that is in the future. However, we still have a bunch of these stalls left, and if anybody is interested, they can reach out and get them from us via the different communication channels that we have on the platform.
Well, I mean, it's a free way to save money.
True.
assuming you aren't driving perfectly. If you're driving perfectly, then maybe you don't save. But.
Yeah. I have not seen that. We have opened, for example, in GIZ, not in this project, in a different project. We have collaborated with truck drivers on eco driving, and we have schooled so many drivers. We have never seen one that already had a perfect driving style.
And they would be the people you would typically think that, were some of the best drivers or truck drivers. And even for them, you're finding ways to save some money. Well, how has the public response been towards your app?
Well, we have launched it 2 months ago, more or less. And for every crowdsourcing approach, of course, it's always the big thing is to get a big user base, right? Especially at the start. At the start, there is no real database yet, so there is not that much of a benefit for the user at the very start, when you are the first one, or the second, or the 10th. So especially this first phase is difficult to get an abundant user base, and you need that in order to get good quality for your data in a crowdsourcing approach. So what we did actually to get a high number of users in the first weeks is we had a campaign where we had a lucky draw campaign, and we asked people to take part in it, to put in data 3 times when they fuel up their car, and then they could win prizes. And we also engaged with different media outlets, social media, as well as national media. And our objective was to reach 1,000 users, because with 1,000 users, you already have a good database. We have now roughly 1,500 users, so I would say the response is quite good. For the start. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go back and talk a bit more about fuel saving tips that people can try in their own driving. Apart from just getting the app, which I'm sure will help teach them all these things. While we're sitting here now, I'd just like your opinion on some of those. For example, obviously Bangkok has terrible traffic sometimes. Yes. How does driving in really gridlock areas differ from fuel-efficient driving in the country? Well, we have all experienced it, I'm sure. When you are in a stop-and-go traffic, like in Bangkok, you have to brake, and then you have to accelerate again. You have to brake and accelerate again. So you use the motor a lot. On the highway, you can go higher speeds. And there, for example, speed is also a very important factor for fuel consumption. It's not that trivial, actually. So you cannot say the higher speeds in general consume more energy than the very low speeds or something like that. It depends on a lot of factors, like, for example, the size of the car, the load of the car, how many people do you have in there, how many suitcases do you pack, and that is a factor. Or then, different kind of factors. But of course, speed is a very big one. The optimal speed differs for every car type, but in general, if I now can give a general tip for the car driver in Thailand and in ASEAN, 50 to 70 kilometers per hour is a good speed where you should be close with almost every car type to the optimal speed. And then if you go very fast, if you go, for example, 130 instead of 110, that already is a fuel consumption increase of 25%. So when you go these high speeds,
another reason not to speed.
More. Another reason not to speed.
Fuel consumption.
If you care about your wallet, if you want to spend your money on other things, then this is a consideration for you.
So when you're in the country, you want to try to maintain a speed that is the most efficient for your car. Whereas when you're in the city, then you want to, I guess, accelerate and deaccelerate slowly in that space that is provided to you in traffic. So of course, don't try to get it in the third gear when you only have 20 meters of space and then hit the brakes super fast. Does weather affect optimal fuel consumption in driving?
Well, Of course, air conditioning use affects your electricity use, right? This is more of a point for electric vehicles. And in Bangkok, especially, it's a topic for buses, because buses do use a lot of battery power anyway. They need a lot of electricity, and if they then use a lot of air conditioning, they need much bigger batteries than maybe electric buses in other regions of the world.
Okay.
It's not so much a factor for normal combustion engine cars.
We have time for one last quick question. If you have anything to tell the viewers at home, what would you want to say?
Maybe let me say two things.
Okay, sure.
So maybe for the general viewer, I start off with one general tip how to save fuel, which is my favorite one actually. And that is that especially for very short trips. If you are somebody who does a lot of short trips, let's say 1 kilometer a trip, just going to the convenience store to get something to eat or so, and you do that a lot, maybe try to think about it twice and rather walk or take the bicycle or any other kind of transportation mode, because especially in this first kilometer of driving, when you start from a cold engine, the car uses a lot of energy. It uses basically 10 times the energy than running when the motor is already hot. So you can think about if you would do a 1 kilometer trip 100 times, then you would have a fuel consumption of 60 liters on those 100 kilometers, as compared to just 6 liters per 100 kilometers in normal driving. So this is really something to consider. It's very high fuel consumption. If you just do 1 kilometer, think about walking if you care about fuel consumption, if you care about the environment, if you care about your own wallet. That will be for the general viewer.
Yeah.
But I also would like to maybe say that, of course, this fuel economy policy is super important, and improving the technology and efficiency of vehicles is important and can save a lot of fuel and have very good benefits for the environment. But it has to be embedded in a more comprehensive policy environment. So we refer to what you have to do in general terms normally as the ASI approach. So first of all, you should try to avoid trips overall, city planning, urban planning, integration of that. Second, you should try to shift trips, shift them from the individual car, where you sit in the car alone and you have high fuel consumption, to the bus, to the MRT, to the BTS, to these mass transit systems. Or carpool, for example, to increase efficiency. And then only the third option is to improve technology for tailpipe emissions and to increase the efficiency of the actual vehicles. So that would be two things that I would like to give you on the road.
Thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, we've now run out of time. I really appreciate Carolyn Capone, Director of Moverity Project GIZ, for sharing this innovative app with us. If you'd like to save money and learn how to drive better, you can download this app. That's it for today and this episode of Thailand Today. I'm Michael New. Thank you for tuning in. Sawadee krap.